Hi, I'm Mark Davenport. I'm here with
Heidi.
Heidi. Yes, indeed. And we want to welcome you to the Wisdom Factory Forum. Should warn you, we may have some internet difficulties, but we have a backup plan in the person of Margarita Crystal Lotus, whom you see
Indeed. And
down
we want
below.
to welcome
All
you
right.
to the Wisdom.
Yeah.
What is that?
I think she's,
okay.
Yep, a little feedback there, took care of it. And we also want to remind you that after conversation, there will be a blab that we can all participate in, anyone who's interested, whether you've seen the show or not. But we'd like to have those who've seen the show join in. But anyway, we have created the Wisdom Factory Forum. It's for people who have experience, knowledge, and wisdom they want to share with the world. And we've been doing these weekly meetings for over a year now, with several seasons. We called one season Wisdom Technologies, another was Conversations That Matter, and we do have community gatherings from time to time, too. We are interested in raising consciousness and spreading the wisdom of integral thought. We are coaches and counselors currently working on relationships for the second half of life, which would include us, obviously. Okay, that's where we are, and that's what we're particularly interested in.
But
At
the moment, we are in a 12-part series.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yes, and that is a series we call "Stop the Relationship, Grow Your Relations." And we have 14 experts scheduled. They operate within an integral worldview, and today one of those is here with us. And that would be, as we talk about conscious uncoupling, the art of separation, with Katherine Woodward Thomas. Say hello, Katherine.
Hi, great to be with you all.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
it's so great to have you here.
Yeah. And Katherine Woodward Thomas is a New York Times best-selling author of the recently released book, Conscious Uncoupling. There it is. 5 Steps to Living Happily Even After. And as well as a national bestseller, Calling in the One, 7 weeks to attract the love of your life. Katherine is a licensed marriage and family therapist and has taught hundreds of thousands of people throughout the world how to have happier, healthier relationships, which includes us, by the way. So, before we continue, Katherine, do you have maybe any corrections or additions to what we've used in our introduction?
No, you're spot on, Mark, and it's really lovely to be here with both of you. Actually, with all 3 of you, because Marguerite is with us as well.
Okay, wonderful.
So I would like to begin because I got to know you more than 5 years ago, 6 years ago almost, when I did my first feminine power course, and then afterwards Calling in the One. I didn't understand what it means first, and then I found out what it means, and then I worked through the whole book and followed the course and followed the coach trainings, and you know, I set the intention, I want to manifest my beloved. And we finished the coach training in September, and in November I met him. So I want to say it really, really works.
Not that we were convinced of it all along the way that it would work. But thanks to you, you really helped change my life, Katherine, as well as yours.
First mine and then yours. And we have both together seven marriages.
Mm-hmm.
So we have also some experience in breakups. And you, from going here, you went to breakups, to uncoupling. Would you like to talk a little bit about the journey which led you from one to the other?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. And I think truthfully, even though I wrote Calling in the One first, and then I wrote Conscious Uncoupling, that in many ways Conscious Uncoupling is the precursor to Calling in the One, because in order to really realize our higher potentials for happiness and health and love, we need to learn the lessons from what we've been through in the past, and we need to have a clean completion. And I always say that your next relationship won't begin when you meet your next partner. It will begin with how you end your last relationship. And a lot of people create a big problem for themselves when they act out of the kind of the biologically based impulse to lash out or to hurt someone who has hurt us, or the victimized story that we create, lacking in complexity. Somebody did something horrible to me and I'm kind of stuck with that resentment, and I'm stuck in the victimized position. So all of these mistakes that we make at the end of love that can diminish our chances moving forward. And one of the reasons I wrote the book was because in the thousands of people that I had been teaching coming through the Calling in the One process, one of the biggest obstacles to being able to call in happy, healthy love was a heartache from the past, was still being lovesick, was still kind of hoping that someone would come back, or still feeling very tentative about opening up their heart again because they've been so hurt in the past, or like an agreement deep down inside, I'm never going to let anyone hurt me like that again. You know, once you've had a bad breakup and really gotten your heart hurt, it's nothing you ever, ever, ever want to go through again. So the principles of conscious uncoupling and the principles of Calling in the One are very similar, which is looking to see ourselves as the source of our experience, to harness the lessons learned, and to be able to integrate that learning in a way that allows us to move forward with confidence that we'll never make those same mistakes again, that we're all the better for the experience, and that we're really ready to have a much more mature, enriching, full, mutual love affair. And I'm so grateful that the two of you are modeling this. Look at you. You're just amazing.
Nothing better could happen, you know. It's really, but you know what? Because I have learned with you, when the first things came up, you know, the old things came up, I knew what it was, and I could say to him, you know what, do you want to know what you are doing just now? And he fortunately said yes.
In my innocence, of course, yes.
And so in the first year, I sort of was a little bit his teacher, because I knew about all these patterns in which I am in which other people are in, and so we began to talk about it. And this really created something which is incredible, beyond our wildest dreams, the relationship.
Yes, exactly beyond our wildest dreams, you know. And that is simply because from where I was before, and I think you too, before, we could not have imagined what a relationship could be like, you know. It was just a projection of the old stuff, you know, fine-tuned, tweaked a little bit, and trying again.
And hope.
And hope. Oh, yeah.
So
but how to actually do it.
Yeah, wow. And I really agree with you that we need to learn our own part, what we are doing to create the separation, for instance, and to maintain this pain. So I would like you to tell us a little bit your experience with all the things I have learned, but I want you to talk about it.
Well, I mean, my own personal experience is that I never really thought when I was younger that I would ever teach about relationship, because I had very toxic patterns in relationship. I was, you know, raised like so many of us with a lot of trauma and a lot of, you know, disappointment and difficulties in my family of origin. And it kind of followed me into adulthood, the decisions about myself that were kind of outside of my conscious awareness, and just like a felt sense of who I was in my body, that I wasn't really worth loving, that I was meant to be alone in this lifetime, that I had, and consequently my love affair really was with God, which I think a lot of us do when we have that kind of disturbance in our younger self. We somehow find God And we make a decision that we must be here just to serve the greater good. And so I did a lot of good. I worked with the homeless for 10 years. I set up a nonprofit. I became a psychotherapist. I was helping people to have better relationships. But I myself was coming home to an empty apartment at night, with my little kitty Clover, and sad about that, really deeply sad about that. And it wasn't until I was really in my early 40s that I was working with the ideas of living an intentional life and deliberately being able to create a future that was a total departure from the past. And so, I'd been on a spiritual journey since the age of 14 when I had an experience. It was like a spiritual awakening. So even though I was troubled as a kid, when, got into all sorts of trouble as a teenager, I was, sneaking out in the middle of the night and smoking cigarettes and going to bars when I was 14 and stuff. I was like a real bad, I was that kid. But I was also reading the Bible, and I was praying, and I was, doing all these things. So I was a seeker from a very early age. But even in all of my seeking and in all of my sitting on the cushion and on the couch and going to therapy and seminars and all that stuff, I still wasn't able to create good relationships for myself. And it was very heartbreaking. I had a particular pattern of kind of unavailable people, one after the other. But what happened when I found out about living an intentional life is that I set an intention, like a bold intention, an outrageous intention to create love, just like you did before Mark came in. And I remember you when it was before Mark. There was like no hope that you had on some level. You were like resigned and game over. We're over 40. Women who were over 40 or, have no chance of finding a great
way over 40. Yeah.
There's that whole mess. So there's a certain consciousness to it, and I think that, for you to take that stand, for me to take that stand was, really, bold and a departure from the past. But the thing that I did is that rather than run right out to find the one, I knew enough to know at that point that there was something in my own consciousness that was happening. If I had this pattern in all different size, shapes, forms, situations, but somehow everybody was unavailable at the same time, at some, never really worked, that it must be my own consciousness. And so I started a journey of going within to discover all the barriers I had built against love. And I began to ask the right questions. So that's the calling in the one process. And I manifest the miracle of love. I was engaged to this wonderful man, married the next year, had a baby when I was 43, living my happily ever after life, delighted in love. And slowly over the years, we started to go in really different directions. Now, my former husband and I, because we were married for 10 years, had a lovely, kind, respectful union. But it wasn't what I felt at some point was really joined in the area of vision and inspiration. And I'm such a mission queen that I felt like I wanted that for myself. So we had a lot of heart-to-heart talks, and we decided to unmarry after 10 years. We have a beautiful daughter together. We co-raise her. But I got really curious about this idea, like, how could we, people are like, don't get unmarried if you have children because you want to stay together for the sake of the children. And I'm sure 50 years ago we would have done that.
Absolutely.
Sure.
But right now, we're called to actualize our potentials and actualize our lives. And sometimes if the relational field is dimming that down and you really work at it and you really get like what's most important to you, what's most important to me, that it's a viable option to say, let's bring completion, let's transition our family. And I got very curious about the idea about, well, what would it look like to have a conscious separation and to create a conscious, loving post-divorce family? Like, what would that look like, where you're not damaging the children? Well, I've since found out in a lot of research that I've done that this idea that the children are just devastated by divorce is not really accurate. The studies actually indicate that it's unresolved conflict between the parents, whether they're married or they're unmarried, that actually destroys children, the psyches of children. It causes them to act out. And in fact, John Gottman, who was a very famous relationship therapist, did an experiment with the children of intact families who were high conflict families. And he demonstrated that the exact same things that we associate with children of divorce, high truancy levels, drug and alcohol use, promiscuous sex, difficulties in relationship that follow people well into adulthood, unstable relationships, not getting married when they're adults, all of those things. The very same patterns are in the children who have intact families of people who are unhappy, who have high conflict, who have covert disdain in the relationship. And so, holding more complexity than the simple don't divorce for the sake of the kids, and really looking at what is actually best for children. What's best for children is parents who are cooperating, who have no toxic emotional residue, who build each other up, who are supportive, and who maybe just live in two different homes, but who cooperate together. And
the value is what you are expressing. The value is the well-being of everybody in the family, and not staying to certain rules or conventions, social conventions, but find out what is the best for me, for my partner, and for my children. And that can be separation.
If it's done well. And, so there's a couple of things I want to say about what you just said. First of all, I got very curious when I made this decision about the happily ever after story that we are all kind of holding ourselves accountable to achieve and holding each other accountable to achieve. So much so that if a relationship ends before one or both people die, we assume that the relationship is a failure, that someone is to blame, that one or both people are to blame, that we have failed at that relationship. So we really are measuring the value of love according to the longevity of that union, as opposed to the value of the growth that transpired, the healing that might have taken place in that relationship, the kind ways that we were able to contribute to each other after the separation, so or the many things that we learned about love that we can now apply moving forward. But the happily ever after myth was created when the lifespan was less than 40 years of age. And there was a recent Time magazine. I don't know if everyone's familiar with Time magazine, such an American icon, institution, Time magazine. But on the cover of it was a picture of a baby, and it said, this child who's born, recently, this child might live to 142 years of age. So then I asked the question, what's it going to be like when we're 142 years? We marry at the age of, 27. And we can just imagine when, a 50th wedding anniversary is considered young love. The blush of love.
Oh, right. We'll have to do some work on the third half of our life.
Exactly. So, just as we update our computer programs and our diets and our exercise routines according to the latest cultural trends, the latest information that we have, given the fact that very few of us will indeed meet one person, have sex with that person, and stay with that one person for the rest of our lives. Really, that's just a small minority of us who are going to have that experience. Studies indicate that most of us will have at least 2 or 3, sometimes more, significant relationships in our lifetime. That's the reality. So I'm inviting us to update our outdated aspirations in love and to hold more complexity when it comes to what we're aspiring to.
Yeah, it is also because we are going through different stages of development. And when one partner is going ahead and the other is not going ahead, the love can still be there, but there is just not, it's like the people are,
this way.
speaking in different, or living in different worlds, literally,
Yeah.
So it is normal that, you want to have somebody, and what I found with him, somebody to talk about what for me is important, what my worldview is. And if you have a person who is, let's say, in integral speech 2 or 3 levels under yourself, it's just difficult to have a meaningful exchange. So the love might still be, but how do you fill the meaning there?
Well, and it's a challenge. It's a complex conversation because I'm pro-marriage, and but I'm just not pro-misery, and I'm not pro people dimming down and giving up on your calling and your destiny. So we have to find ways to be able to value relationship even when we are in that place, because that's actually normal for long-term unions. I think at the end of the day, it comes down to, even when we're here, can we still lean in with interest because we love the other person? Can we still get up underneath and support what their aspirations are because we love them? I actually really value relationships, and I have people in my life who are out of sync with my mission. I just don't want to necessarily be married to that person myself, because I have a very big mission, and my life is my mission.
Yeah.
So that's not going to work for me because it's the center of my life. I mean, motherhood has a deep place in it, but I even understand my mission as part of motherhood, because I think that, 50 years ago, maybe good motherhood looked like baking cookies for your children so that when they came home, you were there with milk and cookies. But now it actually requires us to be advocates to ensure that there is a future for the planet, for our children and our grandchildren. So motherhood is a different game right now. So, but the other thing I want to say that I really want to presence for us is this idea of conscious uncoupling is a great idea to be able to navigate the complexities of separating your life from someone in a way that is conscious and generous and kind and thoughtful. Those are the ideals that we're aspiring to. But what happens in a breakup is that our biology is still kind of rigged to keep us bonded in a way that made sense, 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago. So our biology is really fiercely devoted to staying together. And if you think about 1,000 years ago, if somebody, wandered away from the tribe, they were going to probably die. It was very, very dangerous to not be with your people. So nature has hardwired us for attachment, and our brains even sync up to the brains of those that we're closest to. We regulate each other's bodily functions, we regulate each other's breathing, we regulate each other's body temperature, and we regulate each other's emotions. So that when there's a rupture of attachments, our emotions go crazy. And we go into fight or flight because it feels like we're gonna die. If you're and also it mirrors the first attachment that we ever had to mother or to caregiver that kept us alive. And so we go through those feelings. We're going to die. It feels like a threat to our very life. And of course we go into attack mode very often if someone is leaving us. Plus, nature has so designed us to be rigged to bond with each other, that if somebody rejects us, if we have a partner who says, I'm done with this relationship and I'm leaving, that in the brain chemistry begins to duplicate the same brain chemistry we had when we first fell in love. Meaning that we will be compelled to run after that person with desperation. Please don't go. Please stay. I'm going to die if you leave me. These are all the feelings that we have. Nature has even so hardwired us for connection that nature would actually even prefer a negative bond to no bond at all, meaning that we're liable to go from soulmate to soul hate very quickly. That in nature's world, it's better to fester and to hate and to obsess about somebody than to actually let the person go. The existential death of the relationship, to not be bonded at all. So it's helpful, I break all this out in the Conscious Uncoupling book because it's helpful to begin to understand what's happening in our bodies, because I think the work of conscious evolution is to understand the evolutionary process and to understand where we're kind of hardwired to behave in ways that made sense in the past, but don't really make sense inside of the current cultural context that we now have. And to consciously love ourselves through the process, learn how to hold and contain our own inner experience, and to use the big feelings that are coming up as the fuel for growth and development. And that's what the conscious uncoupling process helps people to do.
Mm-hmm.
This is wonderful.
Yeah. I'm thinking, we live in an age where I think we expect more of our mates than we ever have in the past. And the more we grow and develop ourselves, the more demands we can make on our partner, making it extra difficult to really match one another in so many different ways. There was a time when if each played their role, that was enough, and we didn't actually need much more from them,
And we could stay together
Yeah, and we could stay
happily.
together and be successful, at least in the social sense.
Yeah, what Katherine said before, now women stepped out and want to actualize their calling. And so we don't step back anymore and be the wife. So it's I think what we are talking about is a little bit due to women's development beginning in the 70s. So that we are sort of pushing the evolution.
And men's development, which began in the 90s, okay.
Maybe.
Exactly.
Or maybe it's
Just a moment. No, I think we're following. I think men are following women right now at this point in history. Playing catch up.
Well,
Confused, angry. Well, what the hell is going on? Why is it not working like it used to? Blah, blah. Yeah.
So Stephanie Coons, who is a very well-known marriage historian, has said that relationships have changed more in the last 30 years than in the 3,000 years before. And back in the 60s, there was a study done with co-eds at college, and they were asked, if you met a man who met all of your criteria for a husband, but you did not love him, would you marry him? And close to 80% said they would.
Yeah.
That was just the 60s, 50 years ago. So that's how much has changed, because you're right, Mark. We do expect so much more from our unions. And the good news about that is that it's forcing us to grow, because all of the things that we want in our unions are going to demand that we up-level our capacities to love and be loved, our capacity for self-awareness, our capacity for self-responsibility, our capacity for presence and truth-telling, and being able to hold our own deeper inner experience of anxieties, because the temptation in long-term relationship is to stop telling the truth because you're afraid that the truth is going to rock the boat. What if you tell somebody I'm attracted to someone else, or if you tell somebody, this is really bothering me, or I have this, like sense of repulsion when you show up like that. Like, how do you say those things to somebody, right? Unless you know how to say them in conscious ways that are going to foster, depth and help the union to grow even stronger. It becomes scary. So it's really pushing on us to really up-level our own skills. And this thing that I want to say about women, we have this idea that things are kind of going to hell in a handbasket, that the divorce rate is so high in the Western world, and it's kind of growing, throughout the world. It's and so we're kind of, society is kind of falling apart, because marriage is, of course, the pillar of society. And some people, really think that it's worse now than it ever has been. But truthfully, historically, any time women have risen to equal power with men, the divorce rates rise to about what they are today. Because if women are not economically dependent, or they feel forced to stay in the relationship, then both women and men are more free to end the relationship when it's not working and it's unsatisfying.
Absolutely.
So inside of the happily ever after myth, the challenge is that going into that automatic assumption that we have failed has prevented us from actually learning how to do this well. We don't actually know how to do this well. Even the most conscious people do not do endings well, become stingy, get married to their story about the other person, stop being interested in the truth, get stuck in blaming or shaming, get stuck in a scarcity consciousness around money, start doing petty, nasty things. These are conscious people. This is very normal. It's happening. You can, as I said, it's in the biology. And so we have to really work to do something very, very differently if we want it to go better.
Yeah, absolutely.
I lost the visual on you. Oh, there you are. Okay.
Yeah, I am. Mark had to go a moment. So, you have in the book the steps of conscious uncoupling, or the principles. So I think people would be interested, what is the difference between an unconscious uncoupling and the conscious uncoupling? What do they do? Because I also found, I've done the coaching with people of the integral, let's say, consciousness, but I found the same thing, that they not necessarily know what to do when it's up to relationships and emotions, how to handle emotions. That is not so everyday knowledge and capacity. So what can you tell people what is needed? What is the most important skill to learn, or the important thing to be guided by?
Well, the conscious uncoupling 5 steps. Oops, I'm hearing myself. Do you hear that feedback too, or is that just me hearing it? Oh, good, it went away. Thank you. So the conscious uncoupling 5 steps is like a blueprint of practices on how to move through the process, doing very little harm, and actually creating conscious closure. And the reason why, I just want to, before I go and kind of give you what those steps are, I just want to touch on the reasons why one would even go to the trouble of engaging this process. Ken MacLeod did a beautiful job when he wrote about karma and what karma is. He's a Buddhist teacher. And he talks about karma as not necessarily, tit for tat in the universe. I do something bad and then my wallet gets stolen, It's more that whatever action we take, every single action we take is planting a seed. And it will bear fruit. And so if you're planting seeds of hatred and animosity and revenge in your backyard, you're going to be eating those bitter fruits for many years to come. So every action we take and every choice that we make in the midst of a breakup, we're going to be living with the consequences of those for many years to come. And that's the challenging thing about breakups, is because we emotionally want to take actions that harm somebody, that we feel justified taking. Most of us are very good people until somebody does something that is hurtful to us, and then somehow, we just feel justified in victimizing other people. So the first step of a conscious uncoupling, you have to deal with the big emotions that you're having. You can't bypass those. So you have to learn how to navigate them in a way that's going to actually point them in the direction of creating positive change, as opposed to wreaking havoc and bringing destruction. So if you have great anger, for instance, we want to be able to connect with the anger, the impulse that's under the anger, and sponsor the right wholesome impulse that's underneath that rage. And usually with anger, it's like the reclamation of your rights. I have a right to be treated well. I have a right to be valued by the people that I spend my life with. I have a right to be told the truth to, whatever that reclamation is. And so it becomes like this, from this moment forward, I'm only going to have honest relationships. From this moment forward, I'm going to have relationships where I am valued. From this moment forward, I'm going to stop throwing myself under the bus and self-betraying or dimming down and settling for less in my life, right? There's some stand that's wanting to happen for yourself. And that's really the beginning of the process. I also teach them practices on how to hold and contain those big emotions so that you have your emotions rather than they have you. and you can be in the driver's seat of your life. The second step of the process is what I call the reclamation of power. And excuse me, because I think very often during a breakup we feel powerless to change the other person's mind. We feel like it's just kind of, our life is in disarray, our life is upside down and inside out, and we don't want it like this. So there's a certain powerlessness. The reclamation of power always has to do with being willing to see your part in what just happened. And when we break up, it's such a trauma that it's normal for us to go over the story again and again and again in our minds and try and integrate what's happened. And we might even need to talk about it a lot with our friends. But the challenge is that we will tell that story from a very victimized place, and we get married to our victimized perspective. Well, why is that dangerous? Well, it's dangerous because even if the other person was a beast and did horrible, horrible things, 97% was really on them. Where you want your attention is on your 3%, because you want to know that you're never going to make these same mistakes again. So even if your 3% was passive, like I didn't speak up, or I dismissed my own knowing, or I turned away from the red flags, you need to know what that is so that you can then identify the amends that you would need to make to yourself in how you show up in relationships moving forward, so that you can trust yourself to love and be loved again. Otherwise, you're going to keep your heart closed, defended. You're going to create a lot of walls around love because you know on some level that you could be hurt this way again because you haven't changed your 3%. The third step of a conscious uncoupling has to do with really seeing the breakup in terms of the overall kind of meta pattern of your life and how relationships have shown up, usually inside of a wounding that happened when you were very, very young. Freud called it the repetition compulsion. It's one of the foundations of psychology. Why do we keep repeating these same patterns over and over again? And a lot of us who've been doing work on ourselves for many, many years feel absolute despair over this. We can't believe we've done this again. It's just horrible that we've done this again. And so we go into either deep resignation, or we go into self-blame, or we might even be victimized by our own consciousness. I was just, I'm too damaged, I'm codependent, I have low self-esteem, whatever that story is, and we begin to, have despair that we'll ever get beyond it. So the third step of a conscious uncoupling process really makes very clear the specific ways that the story is happening through you rather than to you, which then begins to restore your power to do it differently. And it goes back to what I call the original source fracture wound, the original break in your heart, and the decisions that you made about yourself, that you've been covertly generating that story ever since. We're such powerful creative machines that whatever we're centered in, whatever consciousness we're centered in, we're creating lives that validate that story. I'm alone, I'm not wanted, I'm unsafe, I'm unloved, whatever that story is. We go back to the original wounding, and we challenge the meaning that you made when you were 2 or 5 or 7 or 9. Is it really true? What might actually be true? Well, I didn't come here to be alone. I came here to love and be loved. It's my destiny to be in deep, loving relationships. That's why I've had such a hunger for it. We course correct the consciousness at the core. And then we start to map out the development then that you would need in order to move beyond it. It sounds complex, but it's not, because I've broken it down into a very elegant process that allows people to graduate forever from that story and to create relationship that's outside of that story, which is what you two are modeling, actually.
Yeah, actually, it's really true. And what I find so difficult for people who haven't seen that it is possible to really get into the idea that they could change. I think when we first come into the idea that what we believe is probably not even true, you know. When we allow that, then we can change. But most people think that it is like this, I'm like this, and the world is like this, and the others are like this, and what can I do? Bong, you know?
Yeah.
And I think this is the most important step first to do, to get into the mindset of, I can change something even about myself.
How does that happen, though? That's the biggie.
And that's what she is doing.
Yep. Uh-huh.
Well, you have to wake up out of the story. There is an awakening, and I've created an awakening process, actually, that works so beautifully, right? In order to be able, if people feel really resigned about the possibility of love, it's because they're overly identified with the story. And so there's a way, the story, first of all, doesn't live in the mind. A lot of us are trying to change our thoughts, like on top of the story. The story lives in the energetic field of the body. The story has an emotional center that's in the body. It's like, and we wear it like an energetic field, and I liken it to the character Pigpen in Peanuts. Remember that character Pigpen? He walked in a field of dust. Yeah, he had like a field of dust around him. So wherever he went, the field of dust just followed him. And that's like what we do with our energy. And I say to people, you know it really, because if you're at a party and somebody walks in the room and you just happen to notice that person, you can tell if that person has a consciousness like, I love myself, I love people, I live in a friendly universe, versus I don't trust anybody, I'm really alone, I'm not liked, I'm not wanted. Like, people have a different feeling about them. They're carrying themselves differently. They're wearing their own persona differently. So we're communicating where we're centered all the time. And inside the old wounding, there is no possibility for a happy ending. You have to actually wake up out of the story.
Yeah, what I find so important, and we should underline it again, it's not about having different thoughts only, because the thoughts, we always think we don't want to repeat that again, and we think it again, and we think it again, and now I should do it different. But that is not really what brings the change. It's what you say, to go into the energy, if we go into the body, into not unconscious, subconscious.
Subconscious,
in
yes.
the subconscious. Sometimes the words.
You do beautifully, actually, with English. I'm so impressed with you always.
Thank you. But sometimes they come out some strange things, and he gets to laugh.
Yes.
Anyway, that it's not enough to decide to think differently, but we have to do the process work. And it's not even that you once got the idea of, yeah, this felt differently. It's really processing and exercising the new skills.
Well, I think, all the people who are talking about changing your thoughts, I love the work that they're doing. And I think that thoughts it's almost like we don't have adequate language. Right, so what we're talking about when you say change your thought, you're talking about change your core consciousness, where you're thinking from, the energetic assumptions of where you're thinking from, and we don't quite have language around that yet. So we've developed a process. Obviously, we do it in both conscious uncoupling and calling in the one, where you wake up out of the old identity, because in calling in the one, it's very hard to create love if you're kind of overly identified with the old story on an energetic level. Might not even be conscious, but it's impossible to really create something outside of identity where we're centered at the level of identity, core self. And so, I love the awakening process, because I'm actually calling it these days the true you awakening. And it just kind of wakes us up to, oh my gosh, I'm not invisible. It's just my mother's narcissism. So I decided that when I was 2, that I was invisible. But actually, the truth is, I came here to be visible. I came here to be seen. I have great gifts to give to the world. It's my destiny to be seen. You wake yourself up out of that trance, and then all of a sudden life becomes creative and fruitful. And everything's possible.
Thanks to you, I step out and be seen. Like here, for instance, to do these things, even 3 years ago, I didn't think about it, but now I feel quite comfortable about that. So I think when we really have a mission to fulfill, we have to get over all these limiting limiting beliefs. And I wanted to go back to your definition that we don't have the words for that, but it is when we say we have to change the thoughts, we have to change the consciousness out of which we create our thoughts. I think this is a perfect definition of what we need to do.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I want to say, you are talking about awakening. In a normal spiritual circles, awakening is something else. And I'm so happy that you call it awakening, because for me, in our lifetime, this is the awakening we need to work on. The other one is nice too, but it's sort of bringing us out of life in many ways, of the real life, which we are here to. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here if we shouldn't have. That is my idea.
Jumping past life, even. Yeah.
Beautiful, thank you. Steps 4 and 5 are actually where I encourage people then to re-engage. See, all these first 3 steps are internal steps. They're things that you're doing on yourself to manage everything that's happening, the tumble that's happening inside of you. And then, of course, you have to deal with the reality of, communicating with your former partner, particularly if you have children or you have a shared community. And then step 5, which is actually dealing with your entire cohesion in the entire community. One of the things that makes conscious uncoupling unique is I don't just see a breakup as a personal process. I see it as, the couples belong to the community. You two belong to the community. You guys are what we would say are pillars of the community. If anything happened to divide you, it would shake us up, because we love you together. We love you individually, but we love you together, and it's meaningful to us and gives us a sense of safety and goodness in life to see your love that you share with us. So couples belong to the community in many ways, and so people are, and then people do things like they divide the community. All those things are kind of natural instincts to do, but they're very, very destructive, and they bring harm to people. So so that's actually the conscious uncoupling process. People have said that it's radically changed their lives, and I feel deeply grateful. And I feel very grateful to Gwyneth Paltrow, who popularized it and continues to talk about it. The visitation from the celebrity gods. The moment she said that she was getting a conscious uncoupling, within 24 hours, it was in the dictionary as redefining divorce in the 21st century. So, very
Wonderful.
to have that kind of impact on culture.
I imagine that people say, yeah, I would like to do that, but what about my husband when I'm a woman? He doesn't want to work on that.
Yeah.
What would you say in this case?
It's challenging. It's lovely. In the perfect world, everybody does it together. They have a conscious uncoupling like Mark and I do. But there are many different situations. There's the situation where somebody is filled with animosity. One person is filled with animosity, or one person doesn't want to break up, so they're not cooperating, and they're acting out of all those primitive things. I think, the process is incredibly useful to continue to go through just for your own consciousness, so that you are not saddled with resentment moving forward, that you can stay out of a place of victimization, that you can continue to show up in your strength and in your power and in wisdom in how you're navigating the separation, that you do no harm. It's going to create lots of karma. And so, these are the principles of conscious uncoupling that can really support a person who's in that situation as well. It really only takes one person to have a conscious uncoupling, even though the preferable is 2 people.
This is good news, no, for all the people who really don't want their children to suffer too much by the breakup. So they can do themselves something. And I have in my coaching...
Or our community.
Yeah, as a community, I have had cases in which the woman was then able to talk with the ex-husband after 10 years of separation, and she got a better understanding with her husband about the children, at least.
Wow, wow, that's very inspiring.
Yeah, it really is. And because she stepped into her power instead of fearing, what would he do when I say that? You know, it's really so important that we ourselves get into our power, and then it will, as you said, energetically, it will come out. It will spread and influence the other person. So, good news here.
Yeah.
Katherine, would you like to tell people a little bit about where they find you? I mean, the books, I can show it again. It's from Amazon. I got it from Amazon, but probably you get it also everywhere. And this is the one I really, you know, there is for every day, there is a lecture, and there's many lovely quotes in this. I really did that every day about 5 years ago.
Yes, you did.
That's wonderful. Well, there's two, because we're talking about two different teachings. I have a consciousuncoupling.com site, which has a lot of resources on it for people, a lot of articles to read, and videos to watch, consciousuncoupling.com. And I also have a free talk at callinyoursoulpartner.com. callinyoursoulpartner.com. And people can find a free talk. I think actually it might be, if you do callingintheone.com, it will actually redirect there right now too. Callingintheone.com.
Wonderful. So I would give Margarita a short possibility, and thank you that you have held the space in case we miraculously it worked. The good energy we have didn't kick us out.
This is the internet's plot to fill her full of information she wasn't necessarily looking for. Yes.
No, because yesterday we fell out all the time. Yeah. So today we are lucky. Thank you, Internet, God, and universe, and your positive energy. And Margarita to hold it and be the backup person to keep the broadcast alive in case we fell out. But if you want to say a takeaway, Margarita, do it.
Well, it's truly remarkable, because what you have talked about, Katherine, is very much what I have experienced every time I split up or got together with somebody. And as a result of that, I actually went in to become an intuitive healer and helping people actually with emotional problems. So, and then you line up every single thing about the process that you have to own it. You can't, that 3% you mentioned, and the other partner had 97. One has to work on that 3%. I think that was a very, very good takeaway for me, because those 3%, those are the most difficult thing that one can do. And one has to actually brace it, look it in the eye, and then come over it. And I've done a lot of these 3%ers with each one of my partners and husbands. So that's my takeaway for today. And yes, very, very nice.
Great.
Thanks,
Thank you.
And Katherine, a last word which you want to say, and you know, which is importantissimo in Italian.
Most important.
Most important.
Most important words to say. You know, I think that a lot of what we're talking about in the call is getting more conscious and having more command over our own inner assumptions, and being more self-aware and more deliberate in how we're doing our relationships, so that we are able to show up with a greater level of congruence with our ideals and what we're aspiring to. And I think it's the work of our time, truthfully, to kind of, you know, have mastery over our own consciousness in this way. And where, you know, at different times, different times in the course of history, people have been, you know, called to forge cities, build cities, and, you know, break through external glass ceilings and change social structures to be reflective of more social justice. I think the work, and, you know, those things are still happening, but I think the real work of our time is to master the inner landscape of our capacity to love and be loved, and And that's what we're all aspiring to. So have more conscious relationship.
Absolutely, thank you. I'm completely with you there because I think we cannot expect peace on earth when we have no peace in our primary relationships. So we have to look, for me, when we want to create peace on earth, we have to create relationships which are peaceful or find ways to handle conflict in a good way, you know?
Yeah. Great.
So thank you so much. I give you the possibility to speak.
Oh my goodness, when you said about, yes, if we don't work it out between us, there's no hope for the world. But we have to really start with ourselves first, do our individual work. But we must express it in our relationships with others eventually. Or it's useless. It's just kind of indulgent. Yeah.
So thank you, Katherine, again. I really owe you a lot. It was 3 years of study, intense study with you and with Claire, and I really appreciate it very, very, very much. And my life has completely changed, and I would recommend to everybody who is listening here, do go and work with these people like Katherine.
And by the way, you said that you met your beautiful man here after the coach training, and there is another coach training this summer. So if people get into go to callinginone.com and sign up for the free call, you'll be in my community, and I'll be able to let you know about it.
Perfect. I can only recommend that, even if you don't work as a coach afterwards, but you learn so much. You know, it's sort of eye-opening.
Thank you.
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. And
right.
the audience, please come over in about 15 minutes to Blab. I think Margarita has posted the link, and we see you there and talk about what we have heard here.
Yeah.
Okay, bye-bye,
Right.
and thank you.
Bye.
Great,
Lots of love,
Margarita.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Yes, Margarita.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.